Welcome back to History on Trial. We are in part 2 of the Amorites, or the Amori, or the Amori. And what we're going to be doing is we're going to be quickly looking at the definitions related to this word Amorite. We're going to look at the people meaning and the word meaning. So we're going to look a little bit at the origin of the word. And we're also going to look at cognates. And so those are same or similar words. So that we get a better understanding of this people group historically. And so we're going to be delving into this in part 2. This is Dr. Tracy McCarthy, psychologist, attorney, and educator, and we are looking at the psychology of identity related to the Amori. If this video appears on anything other than Dr. Tracy McCarthy, it is stolen and unauthorized. Let's get started. And for those of you who have not had a chance to look at the part 1, these are just some depictions of the Amorites, the Amori, the Amori. And here are some additional depictions. And here we have some additional depictions of the Amori, the Amorites. They look a little different in these different depictions here. You can see one depiction on the left side looks a little bit more like the depiction that you just saw, and then the ones on the right look slightly different. And here are additional depictions of the Amorites, the Amori, the Amori. And these are similar depictions, only these are artifacts from Peru. And a quick refresher, the Amorites, or the Amori, were a semi-nomadic or nomadic group of people that lived in Mesopotamia, Palestine, and Syria. They were also reported to be the founders of the city of Mari. Now, there's some discrepancy there because there is some suggestion that the city of Mari actually existed before the Amorites, or the Amori. And so that's something that you might want to research a little bit more. They are also known as being instrumental in the dynasties of Babylon. Now, we've looked at the basic historical backdrop for the Amorites, Amori. So we're going to also look at some scriptural references and notations related to this particular historical group. So they are noted as being Highlanders. And so that's sort of reminiscent of Scotland. So they are known as hillmen. They are also known as sons or descendants of Canaan or Canaan, and that would also include being descendants of Ham. And so you also have the notation that Palestine is known as the land of the Amorites, the Amori. You also have a notation that they were noted as perhaps giants, and that they lived on top of or inside of Mount Hermon. And here you can see a depiction of Mount Hermon. And you can see they are repeatedly noted as dwelling on summits, being mountaineers, being what are known as Highlanders. And so you can see that information here. And they are also contrasted with Canaanites in general, but at the same time, sometimes you will see the use of this name as encompassing all Canaanites, and so it's a very interesting dynamic. So they also had their own mountain, which you just saw, and that's Mount Hermon. And here is additional notation coming out of eSword related to their location. Now, one of the interesting things noted here is that at the bottom you'll see that it says, after the conquest of Canaan, nothing of importance is heard of the Amorites in the Bible. This is very interesting because historically that name does carry on, and as we discussed in the earlier part 1, there is a sort of marking of territory, and so you see parts of this name known as cognates. You see cognates all over the place in terms of this name. Now we're going to look at some of the Hebrew roots of this name. Again, it's pronounced Emori, and it's identified as perhaps a patronymic from an unused name derived from 559, which means to speak or publicity, talks about prominence. And they are saying, you know, perhaps this is related to being a mountaineer, you know, living atop a mountain, that would be synonymous with prominence. And as we discussed in a previous discussion last year, this name Omar is also related to Amar or Amorite or Amori or Omari. And it also relates to this idea of speaking and talking and saying. And one important thing to remember is that context is so important. And so you may see Amora or Amorite or Amori or Amori, and you might see it in one context, it might mean one thing. And then you see it in another context and it means another thing. So you have to look at what the context is to get a better understanding of what the word means in that particular situation. So we see that there is an example of this for talkative, saying, speaking, but there is also an additional one that has the same spelling basically, but again, a cognate. So you have this dynamic where it means something different in a different context. And here you can see a number of cognates, and you see the number that goes along with it. That H in Strong's Concordance relates to Hebrew. In terms of the language, you have Hebrew and Greek. And you can see a number of cognates here. You've got Omar, Amir, Amar, Emir, Emir, Amaria, Mamar. So you have quite a few cognates here. And this is why it's so important to understand context when you are reading something such as this. When you have individuals with this name and you have multiple individuals with the name, you need to make sure that you are talking about that specific individual in that particular context. Otherwise, the name may mean something totally different, you know, in another paragraph. And so this is one example. So you have this name and it looks like it relates to Jah has said. Again, that idea of speaking related to 559. However, we're going to see that it also has another meaning in another context. And here in the blue letter, you see again Emory, and also related to Amorites. That's the name there. And this one is saying that it means a sayer. Now, based upon some historical dynamics, this might also relate to being a soothsayer. And so the sayer may be accurate in relation to this particular group of people, and it may be a specific type of sayer, which is a soothsayer, and that would go along with the general identity of this particular ancient group. And here is an additional biblical reference related to this particular group, and you can see that they are sometimes used to basically define all of the Canaanites. And so the Canaanites might go under the umbrella of them versus them going under the umbrella of the Canaanites. There's also, again, an additional notation that a part of them dwelt in the mountainous region, which was afterwards occupied by the tribe of Judah. And so there are some additional notations if you want to look this information up. And here you have a different notation from Strong's related to the Amori or the Emory. And you can see off to the right-hand side a number of occurrences. And so that's helpful because then you'll be able to see the context that this is used in. Now, dealing with this cognate, you have again Amar, Emory, Amorite. This one means to deal tyrannically. So you have the same word, but you can see that it also may have another meaning in another context. And you can see Amora down at the bottom over there on the right-hand side. And so with this cognate, you have to just double check to see what you are talking about when you're talking about the origin or the specific meaning related to this particular person or this particular word. Now, this is the really odd part, is that when you go further with this Amorite, Amori, when you go further with this, it takes you to the word Amora. And what you see here is that this really is the word for Gomorrah, as in Sodom and Gomorrah. And the G is missing because the G is not actually there. So the word is actually Amora, just like Amorite. The word is Amora, and that is the word for Gomorrah in terms of Sodom and Gomorrah. And that Amar comes from that. Those two are related. So that's the cognate there. And you can see the concordance and you can see the incidence of this particular word. So you can see that it is related to Sodom and Gomorrah. And you can see here again that this Amora, this Gomorrah, is related to being a ruin, a heap, and it is also identified as a place in Palestine. And here are some additional notations, and you can see the occurrences off to the right-hand side. And again, you can see this notation of relating Amora, the Amorites, Amori, to Gomorrah. And Gomorrah here in blue letter is identified as submersion. And it's also the twin city of evil with Sodom, both destroyed and related to iniquity. But again, you see it means a ruined heap and also a place in Palestine. Okay, so we're going to wrap this up, and you can see that with this notation, Gomorrah is a culture and a habitation related to the Valley of Siddim, which is interesting because there's also a people group in possession of a part of that name, so a cognate again. And so this was noted to have sunk into the Dead Sea. Now, interestingly, the people group, they are located in Asia, but they aren't completely clear about how they got there. So there's the belief that they came from Africa, that they were enslaved, but that's not completely clear. Okay, so we have covered in part 2 the definitions related to Amorite, Amori, Amori. So we've looked at this word, we've looked at the meaning in terms of the people group, in terms of the origins, we've looked at the etymology of this word, and we've also looked at some cognates related to this word and related to this people group. In part 3, we're going to begin looking at some of the cultural dynamics related to this ancient group known as the Amorites, Amori. Remember, knowledge is power. Take care. See you soon.